Hello, today is the 14th of July, the fall of Bastille. So it's the National Day of France, a great day for France and the world if we believe indeed in liberté, égalité, fraternité. But I wonder if indeed these three words evoke, as would be nice, realities. I'm afraid that often maybe, or sometimes, maybe these three words are used in a rather demagogical way. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. So let's talk a little bit about Anne Tyng. So Anne Griswold Tyng was born, as you see, on July 14th, 1920. She was an architect and professor. She was about 15 years younger than Louis Kahn. She's best known for having collaborated for 29 years with Louis Kahn at his practice in Philadelphia. Well, for about 9 years, she was also his so-called romantic partner. She served as a professor at the University of Pennsylvania for 27 years, teaching classes in urban morphology. She was a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and an academician of the National Academy of Design. She is the first woman licensed as an architect by the state of Pennsylvania. Tyng received her bachelor's degree from Radcliffe College in 1942. Later, she studied with Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer at the architecture school at Harvard University. In 1944, she was among the first women graduated by Harvard. Tyng was the only woman to enter the architecture licensing exam in 1949. At the test, one of the male proctors turned his back on her and refused to cooperate. Incredible. 1949. She was awarded her PhD by the University of Pennsylvania in 1975. Her dissertation was entitled Simultaneous Randomness and Order, the Fibonacci Divine Proportion as a Universal Forming Principle. Tyng's collected papers are held at the university's architectural archives. So again, this title, Randomness and Order, I think should attract our attention, and perhaps we can talk about this pair of opposites, randomness and order. This was the poster of when was it? I don't see the year, but it's about the same thing: order, randomness, Tyng, perception and proportion. I also like what's written at the bottom: inhabiting geometry. You know, inhabiting geometry. You know, it's like even here is something almost oxymoronic. How could you inhabit geometry? But it is possible. And if we think of the golden triangle that the Egyptians loved, that formidable right angle triangle with one side 3, the other side 4, and the hypotenuse is 5. So it was like a family: the mother, the father, and the child, or the newborn. But inhabiting geometry means uniting life with geometry, geometry and life. And there is a book actually by a Romanian essayist and diplomat, Matila Ghica, who wrote exactly about this. I forgot exactly the name of, he published 2 books, and apparently even Le Corbusier was aware of his works. Or I think one of the books was called the Geometry of Life. I'm not entirely sure, but it was about the same thing: inhabiting geometry. This was Anne Tyng, rather lonely, if you ask me, contemplating this picture. And as I told some people before I started the presentation, I had the chance to talk with her daughter, Alexandra Tyng, many years ago when I needed a letter of recommendation for an exhibition, ad hoc exhibition I wanted to make in front of the Museum of Modern Art in New York on the last day of the New York retrospective. So the New York police agreed, but they wanted me to have letters of recommendation, and one came from her daughter and Louis Kahn's daughter as well, unofficial daughter that is outside of his marriage. So Alexandra Tyng was the daughter, or is, she's probably still alive, Alexandra Tyng, the daughter of Anna Tyng, Ann Tyng, and the daughter of Louis Kahn. Ann Tyng was an architect, a professor, a theorist, and a pioneer of habitable space frame architecture. She was the first female to attend the Harvard Graduate School of Design. Well, the whole material that would follow, I took from Rethinking the Future, a very interesting website, and I'm grateful to I don't know the person who created that material, but I am grateful to him or to her. And I have another presentation on Tyng. I chose to present this one because it's a new material that I was confronted with here, and it was a good gathering of all kinds of informations about her. So let me read. The text, again, does not belong to me, does not belong to Wikipedia. It belongs to Rethinking the Future. Ann Tyng was an architect, a professor, a theorist, and a pioneer of habitable space frame architecture. She was the first female, well, we read that there were a few others. She was not alone, but this person wrote, she was the first female to attend the Harvard Graduate School of Design. She wrote substantially about geometric architecture, exploring ways to apply numeric and natural systems to buildings and urban design. Wistfully, architectural history remembers Tyng only as one of the pioneering engineering partners of Louis Kahn, and has inexorably dismissed Tyng as a leading, self-contained, and an upbeat woman. I don't know about this expression, self-contained. I imagine the one who wrote is perhaps comes from a different culture and a different language, and sometimes the way he expresses or she expresses himself or herself in English is a little bit problematic, I think, but I will continue to read. She got fame only way too late in her life. Alas, she stayed as a competent woman, disguised as a shadow, which she ironically never could escape. It's probably true. So now, a building which I always thought was designed by Louis Kahn, but apparently they work together, Ann Tyng and Kahn, built in collaboration between Tyng and Kahn. This structure was a breakthrough for Kahn's career. It's true, as a need for a new art gallery with a modernist structure, this was designed. One of the most celebrated structures in both Tyng and Kahn's career. The concrete tetrahedral slab ceiling, which was the most magnificent element of the design, was inspired by the geometric forms of Buckminster Fuller and was designed by Tyng. Although the pristinely restored facade, the interior still triumphs. And this is the facade of the building, an early work of Louis Kahn, or should I say an early work of Ann Tyng and Louis Kahn, or Louis Kahn and Ann Tyng at Yale University. He built another work at Yale University, the Museum of British Art, but later. But indeed, the ceiling is glorious in its strict geometry, but also sensitive geometry. And we can only salute this work, which over the years didn't lose its architectural qualities. And it is very possible that Buckminster Fuller was right when he said that Tyng was Louis Kahn's geometrical strategist. And this is the ceiling plan. You know, I would put it on the wall right now as a great graphic work. It's impeccable. You know, it's impeccable even as a drawing. Because the meeting between structure and ornament is quite convincingly exemplified here. We have functions, we have stairs, you know, we have an elevator, we have everything that you know, deserves our attention in terms of function, and yet it is a very nice graphic work, and yet it is a very nice building. So between the drawing and the building, there is no distance. And those who think that architecture is not an art, well, on one hand, they should open any history of art. And surprisingly, they will find a lot of architecture there. And the question is why? If it is not an art, what does architecture do in the history of art? So very often, if not almost always, this is art. Yes, there are functions, but it is art. And maybe it's even more impressive when you think that, you know, they had to deal also with, you know, prosaic matters, with what we call functions. But there is also the function of beauty and the function of ornament. And structure indeed becomes ornament, and ornament becomes structure. A very nice collaboration between Tyng and Louis Kahn and Tyng. I don't know about this panel here. I don't think it was done by them. The Trenton Bathhouse, this is another seminal work which I thought belonged to Louis Kahn at the time when I didn't even know that Tyng existed. This project is not a bathhouse as it means, but an entrance and a changing room for patrons of an outdoor swimming pool, and is an element of a community center campus. 9-square plan is based on a tartan grid. I don't know what the tartan grid is, with square corner piers being the primary structure. Kahn returned from his fellowship at the American Academy in Rome. He was very influenced by, you know, the ancient Rome and what Italy offered him. He was very, very influenced by that year he spent in Italy and in Rome. So when he returned, his work changed, because before he went to Italy, he was a rather non-convincing modernist. He built some, especially, you know, social housing, apartment buildings, a few commercial structures, but they had no relationship to what we call the past. Until he visited Italy, when he came back, a change occurred. And it's very possible also that his meeting with Tyng influenced also his approach to architecture. This is it's not a, you know, a giant architectural work. Quality doesn't need, you know, giant dimensions, but it's a very significant work. It's very simple, it's symmetrical, and I should have had more images here. Here I only reproduce what Rethinking the Future published. I should have developed the material, and it could have been done. But for those who are interested to study this work or any other work, you know, the internet is very generous, and a lot of information can be found. It's a great work. It's very simple, but it's also has a sensitive austerity. The structure, the woodwork of the roof is also very noble and simple and yet complex. Um, this drawing does not belong to Louis Kahn, and I don't know if it belongs to Tyng. It was published on Rethinking the Future, but I like to think that it belongs to neither of them, because it's a rather, predictable sketch, so to speak. But it's illustrative, is descriptive, and maybe that's why Rethinking the Future published it. So this is the Trenton Bath in New Jersey, not far away from Princeton. Now the Wharton Escherich Museum, which was done by Tyng, was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1993. This is a very interesting work, in my opinion. Wharton Escherich Studio. I like it because it has, on one hand, a certain almost, fable-like sweetness, and on the other hand, a certain monumentality with some almost ominous overtones. So this meeting between, elements of almost disorienting a gingerbread house, and then you have, that tower on the right side, which is imposing, and so there is this balancing act between, on one hand, a certain amount of domesticity, sweetness, domesticity, domesticity, and on the other hand, something that transcends the predictability of the aforementioned domesticity. I don't know if I explained well spontaneously what I have in mind when I look at this work, but I like it and it intrigues me because it's indelible in a way. It's a different kind of sensitivity you'd expect from not just Louis Kahn, but in general, modernist architects. Maybe a better psychoanalyst than me would have more interesting things to say. But now I feel like saying that it is a work which shows a certain femininity, I would say. Although perhaps I shouldn't say so, because a good work is a good work. Maybe we cannot say this is a feminine work and this is a masculine work. But the very author of this article on Rethinking the Future does talk about machismo of masculinity in modernism. And the different conditions of light, the building is changed somehow. So I would say a very interesting work. I know I didn't say something very special or very, astute, but I'm willing to reflect more on this work, done not by Louis Kahn, but by Tyng. I mean, even the setting, is so almost undesigned, and I like the the vernacular aspect of it, and the rurality, and the in a way the absence of the designer. It is as if the designer left on her tiptoes the building site. Now we go to a very different kind of work, and I knew absolutely nothing about Tyng participating in this very important work that I always thought belonged to Louis Kahn. the Jonas Salk Institute for Biological Studies in La Jolla, California. This Biological Study Institute was built for Jonas Salk, yes. The client, apparently, and I read this in L'Architecture d'aujourd'hui, asked Louis Kahn to create a facility worthy of a visit by Picasso. And thus the Institute carries its function along with enormous beauty amidst its architecture. This is rather interesting because I don't know if you know, Jonas Salk married the second or the third wife of Pablo Picasso, of course, after they got divorced. Now, you know, one could speculate, well, maybe Jonas Salk could have said, create a facility worthy of a visit by Picasso's wife, who later became his wife, Jonas Salk's wife. Anyway, this is just, you know, an anecdotal little story. But Louise Kahn and Tyng, if indeed she was involved, and I imagine she was, otherwise Rethinking the Future would not have mentioned this fourth work as belonging to the group of 15 significant works by Anne Tyng. It is a remarkable work by Louise Kahn and Anne Tyng, or I don't know, should we say Anne Tyng and Louise Kahn? I could talk day and an evening and another day about this building, perhaps, which is very inspiring because here we see l'esprit de géométrie and l'esprit de finesse, the spirit of geometry and the spirit of fineness in a very convincing conjunction. They use concrete, but they also use wooden paneling in teak, and it's this conjunction between wood and concrete which is so appealing, I think, because the wood, and Louis Kahn used this also in the Museum of British Art at Yale. Wood brings in an intimate quality, a warmth, and you know, it balances the cold conglomerate, to refer to what Frank Lloyd Wright thought about concrete as being a conglomerate. The cold conglomerate concrete is. Maybe these pictures, which I took from Rethinking the Future, are not the most telling, but because of the color of the wood here is almost washed out and it becomes grayish. But I saw pictures where the wood is distinctly different chromatically than the concrete parts of the building. Those windows are oriented towards the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and there are even speculations now. I don't know if it's true or not that the sun sets. I think I forgot the equinox of the solstice, exactly in line with the channel of water that crosses longitudinally the space between the two rows of laboratories that face each other, but through those diagonal segments of the research rooms, the laboratories are oriented towards the ocean. I read that actually Louis Kahn asked Luis Barragan, his friend Luis Barragan, to he didn't know what to do about this space between the two rows of the building. He actually wanted to plant it, to use vegetation, and apparently Luis Barragan advised him not to have a very, in a way, austere plaza between the two sides of the building. And Kahn listened to him, and I think he chose the right path to avoid the vegetation. And it's a famous space. There are even happy newly married couples taking pictures of them. They're crossing the channel of water, and it's a favorite for spectacular pictures with the sunset, I would say, and not the sunrise. But it could be the sunrise too, although I think it's the sunset. Yes, it should be the sunset on the west coast. And now, what is this? This is another building by Tyng, her own former residence. This residence speaks about Tyng's legacy and is her most powerful expression. She renovated her house. Again, this text belongs to the author who wrote about this on Rethinking the Future. So Anne Tyng renovated her house in the 1960s and made additions to it. One can find Tyng's papers in the architectural archives at the University of Pennsylvania, wherein she has included brochures for all the small-scale gadgets. She had armed her kitchen with the avant-garde engineering drawings of the third floor addition, a wooden space frame that resembles some exceptional form of origami. One of the later owners of the house says, "Living here feels like walking in music." Quite a compliment, no? I mean, any architect should desire to provoke such reactions. The house has a lifetime of radical architectural thinking tightly packed into its 1,300 square feet. It's a small house. The new owner of the house simply has decided to preserve the heritage designed by a woman who never had a role played in the forefront, thus the endowment by the lady. And this is her addition here at the top that Anne Tyng did. It's not assuming, you know, in a, certainly not in a masculinist way. It is distinctly modern and innovative, but not assuming with the, you know, the audacity, not to say impertinence of some, you know, maybe similar additions done by, you know, male architects. The interior is has complexity and simplicity. Her own house. Now another one, four-poster house. Tyng became the first architect to frame a traditional peaked roof house with a fully triangulated three-dimensional truss while designing the extension to her parents' house. This structure leaves the region ecologically intact as it is connected to the ground only at its four central concrete foundation piers and the rest is cantilevered. Unfortunately, this structure was lost in the fire of the 90s, but four models exist in the permanent collection of the architectural archives of the University of Pennsylvania. And you see it here on the right, and drawings barely decipherable, but this image itself is enough to have our imagination stirred up, I would say. I don't know if this was built after the work collapsed, or I don't know what it is. But there are the pictures with it, and it looks spectacular. The drawing itself, this drawing that she made, shows a remarkable ability to marry the certitude of geometry instability of emotion. You know, it's clearly a work that didn't neglect dimensioning, that is geometry, but at the same time, this drawing is, cryptical, it's enigmatic. And I think this was a quality which Tyng had. She was able to infuse geometry with emotion, with sentiment. This was the house. Remarkable house. It's too bad it vanished. And this was done for her parents, obviously open-minded parents. Maybe some parents would not have accepted such a structure or such a building, but her parents did. Probably they love her very much. And an exhibition of hers. There are the structure you see on the right, the Platonic solids. We are going to see more pictures of this. I truly admire this lady. Not only she sacrificed her life for Louis Kahn, but she was a remarkable architect herself. And, I'm sure she suffered. She continued to create, and in a way, distinctly hers, if we are to compare her work from the work that Louis Kahn did. Louis Kahn, whom I admire very, very much, but who didn't post her name when he showed the model of that tower that we are going to see a little bit later in an exhibition, I think, at the Museum of Modern Art. And this hurts to know that, in the name of truth, in the name of justice, he should have not only accepted the presence of her name, and she was his lover, but also to enhance it. Normally, he should have placed the name of his lover, of his lover, yes? The name of his lover, does it sound correct? Yeah, her lover, the name of her, oh yes, of his lover, yes. Above his, I think. Tyng toy, a noteworthy contribution to children's art, was made by Tyng with this toy. It is an assembly of a total of 11 parts, with basic 5 parts which can be assembled in various assemblies. This project makes Tyng equivalent to Ray and Charles Eames, or Isamu, S-A-I-S-A-M-U. Anyway, it's misspelled the name, who took children's education solemnly and softened the male machismo or machismo of modernism. Here she is as a young lady with this toy that she invented, that she created. And I think this picture is important, because it shows the dreamer she was, and the lover of life. Maybe the Latins are not always right when they say that the art is long and life is short, ars longa vita brevis. Maybe, as Lebbeus Woods said, he didn't say sometimes. He said life is long and art is short. Anyway, another beautiful picture with this boy, using the furniture that she created, and another one with the boy and the girl. Yeah. The divine proportion in the Platonic solids exhibition. These are, I think, her notes, and with the drawings of the toy she invented. 1949, just a few years after the madness of the Second World War. The Platonic solids, or the Platonic solid, Tyng, In 1965, Anne Tyng was the first woman to receive a fellowship from the Graham Foundation for her project Anatomy of Form, the divine proportion in the Platonic solids. And here she is in the exhibition. Bravo to her. You know, I keep saying to myself, and I keep saying to whoever was to hear it, Stephen Hall was right. Remain idealistic. The soul needs the ideal more than the real. Yes, the soul needs the ideal more than the real. This is what Stephen Hall said. And I believe it is true. Unfortunately, very, 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 very often we forget the ideal and we think the reality, whatever we call reality, because true reality includes the fantastic, includes the dream, it incorporates it. Reality is not what we think it is. It's more than that. Maybe it includes even the many angels that fill the sky. If I am to refer to a quotation from Daniel Lipskin, who said, well, quoting Swedenborg, that the more angels in the sky, the more space. But who is thinking about angels today? You know, we have planes in the sky, but not angels. Who is thinking about the Platonic solids? We are just, you know, playing with form, but we don't think about the metaphysical aspects of architecture very often. But Anne Tyng did, I think. And these structures testify to her taste for the absolute in a way. Yes, it is geometry, there is logic, but there is also the instability of emotion, as I said, and it's also this intertwining between the ideal and the measurable, or to use Louis Kahn's words, between the immeasurable or the unmeasurable and the measurable. Because we remember that Louis Kahn said that a great building should start with the immeasurable. I'm always hesitant. I don't know if he said immeasurable or unmeasurable, but you know what he meant. It starts with the unmeasurable or the immeasurable, and then it goes through the measurable, the second phase, the so-called design, and then it comes back into the immeasurable or the unmeasurable. Unfortunately, most of the time architects ignore the first stage and the third one, meaning, you know, the impulse, the creative impulse that has its eyes on those stars that Oscar Wilde mentioned, meaning the immeasurable or the unmeasurable, and in the end, it returns to them. If the building is great, if the building is not great, forget it. You know, it's just measurableness. They are beautifully crafted, they are beautifully built, they are coherent for the logic of the brain, but they also open up to the beating of the heart. I like them very much. I hope they were not destroyed. I also read that that Anne Tyng apparently was interested in Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst who, you know, challenged Sigmund Freud. This is another interesting subject for discussion. You know, architecture and Carl Jung. Urban hierarchy, the intricate plans, elevations, and models for her pioneering but little known urban hierarchy project in 1969-1971 elucidate how she translated her immense love for basic geometric elements into viable structures and systematic social solutions that are human in scale and materiality. Again, the text belongs to Rethinking the Future. And this is an urban project, you know, or a project of urbanism, if we are to call it so. I don't know. I like to think that this drawing belongs to her. And I think it does, because what I know about the graphic works of Louis Kahn, he didn't draw like this. Nor was this kind of architecture his. So it's very possible this was her drawing. And it's not bad at all. It shows clearly that this lover of geometry was also a lover of movement, the dynamics of movement, and the instability of movement. Tyng spent most of her career working as an associate partner with Louis Kahn, Louis Isidore Kahn, or Isadore Kahn. The projects they worked on together are listed below, but they worked together in some of the works I showed until now as well. The City Tower, a very famous work, which, you know, most people associate with Louis Kahn, but apparently Tyng had a great role here. City Tower, an integral futuristic project engulfed into turning every level to connect it with the one below, making a continuous complex structure. The tower seems to be in motion due to its unique design, but in reality, it's stable. Again, it's about stability and instability, at least apparent instability. Although never built, this structure was represented at the Museum of Art exhibit Visionary Architecture in New York City in 1960. It's a great project, and I can only regret it was not built. And yes, the experts, those who know, say that Tyng had a significant role in this, in the making of this design, in the making of this project. The relationship, well, maybe I shouldn't venture into this field. I was just thinking that in the relationship, although there was nothing romantic between Le Corbusier and Yannis Xenakis, while in the case of Louis Kahn and Tyng there was. But what happened was when Le Corbusier and Yannis Xenakis built the great pavilion in Brussels, in Brussels, in, I think 1955, 58, between 55 and 58, they did a great job. But from what I understood, the role of Yannis Xenakis was really very, very, very important. And unfortunately, they even had a, conflictual relationship afterwards, because Le Corbusier didn't quite acknowledge sufficiently, I would say, the role of Yannis Xenakis. In this case, Louis Kahn didn't acknowledge the very significant role of his lover, Tyng. And this is very regrettable, I would say, because this lady was noble enough to give birth to his daughter, if I can call her so, and it shouldn't be seen as a pejorative statement at all, his illegitimate daughter, because she was outside of the marriage of Louis Kahn, Alexandra Tyng. And she contributed creatively to this work, and her name was left out, I understood, in the first showing of this project. I don't know, at the Museum of Modern Art, or maybe I have here the short text about this. I like the structure very much. It's free and unfree at the same time. It's stable and unstable. An oxymoronic building. Rigorous and yet lyrical, because of the broken geometry, or apparently broken geometry. To have freedom and the rigors of geometry in a conjunction is not an easy thing to do at all. A great tower, imagine it was built. It would have been better than anything Sir Norman Foster, for example, would have built or built. but it was not built. I don't know who wrote this. Modern computers allow us to use geometry in our daily lives without comprehending it, but Tyng had no such luxury when designing the city tower. This is another great work of, as I knew, Louis Kahn, but apparently Tyng had a role here as well. The Bryn Mawr dormitory in New Jersey, and a very important work. This was a modern Scottish castle. 3 diamond-shaped units connecting form the largest dining space in the college and splendid meeting space. Maybe a little bit cold inside because of the concrete, but it is an excellent work. Maybe a little bit austere for some, from what I read, but yes, a very serious architectural work, rigorous, with the diagonals or the rotations present in order to create a dynamic quality using a very clearly defined geometry. And this is the interior, a lot of concrete. You would say rather is, yes, the austerity of a monastery. The Weiss House, I'm not sure I pronounce well this name. This one-story house displays a perfect blend of history and one of its kind's architecture. Again, this language does not belong to me, the text. Once a profound piece of architecture, now is on the verge of depletion. This house has been declared at risk by Preservation Pennsylvania. Now here it's possible that the role of Tyng was bigger than in some other collaborations with Louis Kahn. In fact, this building, I didn't even know it belonged to his office. Kahn built a little bit differently when he was by himself. So I don't know, but they worked together. That's what we read here, that these works were done in collaboration, Tyng and Louis Kahn. The Mill Creek redevelopment plan, this also took me by surprise because I knew this work as belonging to Louis Kahn. It was published in magazines. This is an early work by Louis Kahn and Tyng. It was built in 2 phases and consisted of 3 17-story high rises. The urbanist architecture had left the world spellbound, this person wrote. A perfect blend of design and utility is now left only on the pages of history. I think it was demolished. This complex of buildings, we don't see the towers here. We only see the lower height buildings. They were inexpensive, blocks of flats, maybe even social housing. This is sorry about the resolution of the plan. This is how Louis Kahn built before his travel, his 1 year at the American Academy in Rome. There was a modern architecture and the relationship with the past was not so emphatic and dramatic as it was after he returned from Italy. Exactly what the role of Tyng in this project was, I do not know. But we see here randomness, don't we? Louis Kahn was a very rigorous architect, but I think his artistic instincts were open towards accepting and maybe even promoting randomness, or at least the randomness that Tyng seem to be inclined towards. Urban planning. Maybe this sketch might have belonged to Tyng, because Kahn drew differently. And we are going to see a little bit later sketches by Louis Kahn. The Civic Center project in Philadelphia, an idea of a city surrounded by massive cylindrical parkings, towers defending the center, was thought of but never came into existence. Unfortunately, it didn't. It's true, it was not the kind of urbanism the United States aspired towards, almost medieval in character. This drawing maybe doesn't show as powerfully as does the next one, which is this one. So he wanted to enclose the parkings, he wanted to liberate, to free the public spaces, the squares, of the presence of the cars. So he hid them in these fortresses, at the edge, on the fringe of the public spaces that he tried to envision. It would have been a heroic architecture. Personally, I regret it was not implemented. Louis Kahn used to say that an unmoving car, meaning a static car, is a sad sight. Well, here the cars would not have been seen because they would have been housed in the parkings around the square. But again, a heroic architecture with a character probably a little bit difficult to be comprehended or understood by the American society of that time. I think this drawing deserves some discussion and some study. Because what I see here is the opposite of the urban sprawl, the suburbs, the open urbanism, the city which extends ad infinitum. This is close actually to a medieval city where you have a citadel-like center. Of course, any architect who has a certain confidence in himself or herself would place previous studies in the representation of the project at hand. So here is the city tower designed with Tyng, finding room in this so-called visionary scheme for Philadelphia. But we remember that Frank Lloyd Wright did the same thing in his Broadacre City project. Yeah, there are silhouettes resembling a lot, if not being identical with the Price Tower. And here we see the city tower that they worked on, Tyng and Louis Kahn. Anyway, an interesting project, but it didn't come into being. It took one of the poorest countries in the world, and that is Bangladesh at that time, one of the poorest, to invest in Kahn the confidence and the interest to build the administrative political center of the country, which Kahn did. And we can only applaud Bangladesh for doing something for architecture that a much more powerful country like the United States didn't do. But this also happened to Le Corbusier. Chandigarh commissioned him, but not France. Redevelopment plan for Philadelphia and Tyng, another visionary project which never came into existence. This showcases urbanist visions of Kahn and Tyng. And, just, I don't know exactly what they represent, circulations, but it's cryptical, it's magical almost, as a drawing. It's graphically endowed with coherence, but also mystery. It's poetical, in other words. So, a subtle thought could infuse a drawing and could create even of an utilitarian representation, could create a magical entity, in this case a graphic one. I mean, these are, arrows of movement, probably vehicles, maybe pedestrians, but it's like a musical composition. It's musical. It's musical, and it reminds one of graphic. I mean. Musical notations by Yanis Xenakis, since I mentioned him earlier, or even John Cage. So architecture meets music, and this is the perspectival drawing with the maddening cars entering right there in the belly of the building, and we see here the giant parking. Being populated with a great speed, the speed of modernity. And this is, we saw already this image, order randomness and Tyng. Bravo to her. Let's wish her happy birthday. For me, she wrote, architecture has become a passionate search for essences of form and space, number, shape, proportion, scale, a search for ways to define space by thresholds of structure, natural laws, human identity, and meaning. That's what she wrote in when it was published in 1984. And here is another quotation from her. Many women have been scared away from the profession because of the strong emphasis on mathematics. All you really need to know are basic geometric principles like the cube and the Pythagorean theorem. Nice. And indeed, it is an encouragement, not just to women, but I would say to men as well. So, an overlooked influence, Tyng. Happy birthday to her. Thank you.